You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. Just when you thought flexible working conditions were becoming more widespread amongst companies, the CEO of one of the world's leading internet companies has banned employees from working from home. Yahoo's Marissa Mayer wants workers in the office. A memo sent from the HR department said, "Speed and quality are often sacrificed when we work from home. We need to be one Yahoo, and that starts by being physically together." A recent survey has revealed that 60% of British companies offered some kind of remote working in 2011. 5 years before that, that figure was just 13%. To discuss the home working revolution and the decision by Yahoo to stop employees from doing so is Hamish McRae, financial journalist and associate editor of The Independent, Dr. Almut McDowell, occupational psychologist and head of Work-Life Consulting Limited, Sally Peck, editor of Mother Tongue, The Telegraph's digital parenting hub, and Jennifer Owens, editorial director for Working Mother Media based in the US. First of all, I'm going to come to you, Jennifer. What's the reaction in the US to what could be perceived as an ironic statement from the CEO of a tech company stopping people being plugged in 24/7 at home and demanding they come into the office?
There's actually a fair amount of anger about it, I would say. I think people think that it's a very backwards-looking thought, and there is a bit of fear. I think there's a lot of fear on Yahoo's part that they're unable to manage a workforce that's going 24/7, and they're not sure what everyone's doing every moment of the day. But then you also have fear from generally the workforce, fueled a lot by working moms, but by many people talking about how the flexible workforce, they don't like to see something that looks like it's going backwards.
Sally, you're the editor of Mother Tongue and you communicate with mothers on a forum online. What's the reaction been to this?
I think a lot of mothers in Britain have also been upset about this. They want to be able to work from home. But my position is that working from home when you're also looking after children is almost impossible. And you need full-time care for the child if you're going to work at home.
So do you think that this is a statement saying, I know I've done it, from Marissa Mayer, who's had her baby, and that she thinks, OK...
No, not at all.
OK.
I mean, she's in the very early stages of motherhood. She is a lot wealthier than any of us, I'm willing to bet. She's an extraordinary person, and to hold her up as a model of what motherhood should be is just ridiculous. She's made a business decision. She thinks her workers aren't working well enough from home, so she wants to have them in the office. And I think to see her as a model for motherhood is wrong.
You mentioned that yourself, you believe that working from home with a child is not possible.
Unless you have a full-time carer for the child.
In which case that means that you may as well be in the office.
Yes, although it cuts down on commuting times and it cuts down on office expenses for the business, so...
Well, let's move to a business perspective then. And Hamish McRae, the financial journalist and associate editor of The Independent, you speak of working from home and the sort of digital revolution of flexi hours being an economic phenomenon.
Well, if you look at the UK, and I just carry the figures in my head, you find that there are something like rather over 1 million people who work solely from home, and there are about another 1.5 million who are working from home as a base, but travelling around, in airport lounges and in their cars on laptops and so on. So that's 3.5 million people. That's 12% of the workforce, and it's going up by about 100,000, 150,000 every year. So something is driving this. Now, is it that companies want to cut their costs and get people, get them out of the office? Or is it actually that people want to work at home? Or is it a phenomenon of working mothers? Now, I don't know the individual reasons for it, but my guess is, A, it's technically possible, because we have in our homes as much kit as a multinational would have had 20 years ago in its office, and probably a better research department. But also, it's also an age thing as well. And you get a lot of people who are downsized out of jobs in their 50s and 60s, want to go on working and become home workers, working part-time or something or other, doing consultancy work. So it's a complex phenomenon, but something very powerful is driving it.
How significant is it then that this is the boss of Yahoo who has made this statement and announcement? What kind of message does this put out to other companies? I mean, we've already had other media companies like Virgin saying it's perplexing. Why would you do this? The 9-to-5 day has changed. Do you think this is going to have a negative rippling effect to other businesses?
I don't think so. I think what it does show is that it's hard to manage a workforce that you can't see. And you have to do all sorts of ways of making sure they are included and actually measuring what they do. So I think that it's a management challenge which they've decided to duck for whatever reason. It's not a wake-up call to industry as a whole.
And that management challenge is where you would come in, Dr. Almut McDowell, as an occupational psychologist. You're head of Work-Life Consulting Limited. Mm-hmm. Tell us what that is, because that may be the answer to this management challenge.
I run my own consultancy, really advising organizations on flexible working, on work-life balance, mainly because they don't pay me enough in academia, but also because it's a genuine, passionate interest to me. I've got 3 girls as well, so I know what it's like to be working from home with a baby going off in the background. Now, I'm quite passionate that more flexible working is the future. And what I would like, Ms. Mayer, really is actually what is the evidence at the moment that it isn't working? How can you say that home working isn't working? What is the data? What are you actually basing this on? I think really the crux of the matter is that we are not very good at measuring performance and productivity. So often hours spent at a desk and being visible have become a proxy measure for telling actually whether or not a worker is a good one. But who is to say that people couldn't be even more effective when they're working from home? Yes, point taken, you need the right infrastructure. It's no shortcut, and you manage it properly. But I'm with Hamish on that one. I think that was a bit of a challenge being ducked here.
A challenge being ducked. Your job, I suppose, is to extract the best outcome for an employee.
Absolutely.
And so you would argue then the opportunity to work from home is as profitable and as positive as it is going into an office.
Indeed, because we've got very good data showing from very robust studies that actually performance is no worse when people are working from home. Quite the contrary. It can actually be better. What research has shown over the years, though, is there are certain conditions when any worker is working better and more effectively. And 2 of these conditions really are to give people control over their working environment and to give them choice. And I would quite like to know actually what kind of effect it would be having on people's morale in Yahoo to have had one of those choices taken away from them. I could see that from a worker's perspective who's been working from home, has been working effectively, has got a good infrastructure in place. And now you're being told, actually, tomorrow you have to be in the office again. That's not going to do wonders for how you feel inside yourself. And actually, we've got decades of research to show that a happy worker is a better worker. So also I think there's a real well-being issue here if you put processes into place and then take them back again. That transition has to be managed carefully. And I'm still not quite sure what actually the reason was for turning back on a decision. I actually haven't seen any convincing data that would back that up.
Hamish, do you see any financial reason for this decision?
I think that Albert's point is exactly right. That it's but you have to measure work very carefully, and there may be something happening in Yahoo that people were sloping off and they weren't measuring their work properly, or something. I don't know what was individually happening in that company, but I do think that you have to work rather harder to make sure that home workers feel included, not just measuring their work, but actually you need to get them into the office some of the time so they feel they're sort of members of a club.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare, and we're talking about the choice to work from home after the head of a huge internet company announced it will ban employees working at home from June. Are companies keeping up with the changing working patterns that have stemmed from globalisation? To discuss this, I'm joined by Hamish McRae, financial journalist and associate editor of The Independent. Jennifer Owens, who's the editorial director for Working Mother Media in the US. Dr. Almut McDowell, an occupational psychologist, head of Work-Life Consulting Limited, and an academic at the University of Surrey. And Sally Pegg, editor and writer of Mother Tongue, the Telegraph's digital parenting hub.
There's a study that was mentioned in the New York Times last weekend, done by Stanford University and Beijing University, which I'm sure you've read about, but which suggested that, as you say, working from home improves worker morale, which makes them happier. They have a better job satisfaction. But interestingly, and it was only with call centre workers, it's not a perfect study, call centre workers in China, but apparently those working from home did not get promoted nearly as much as those who had time in the office. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, Hamish, which is that it's an evolution. We're not quite there yet. We don't know how to manage home workers. And particularly in the context of working mothers, I think if I'm not putting time in the office, I know people are going to forget about me, and I won't get the best assignments. I won't get the best stories at the newspaper. And that's very important. And I think, so I think for me, that's part of the evidence that working from home isn't the right solution for mothers.
There seems to be that this digital revolution has gone at such a pace. We have at home what tech companies would have 20 years ago. Therefore, has the evolution of home working, like you say, Sally, hasn't kept up. Where does it go? What's next? Maybe you've got an idea, Jennifer.
Well, we do the Working Mother 100 Best Companies, which is based on an application that is about 550 questions right now. So we judge companies on childcare and advancement of women, and flexibility is a huge part of it. And flexibility is a continuum for us. There's flex time, where you can change your start or end date of your day. There's working from home, which can be, we actually split that up into remote work, hoteling, which is you're never in the office. Maybe you're a consultant, you're jumping into different companies all the time. There's also just telecommuting, which is, I telecommute 1 day a week. So I consider myself working from home, but I'm in the office 4 days a week, which is a part of the continuum of working from home. We also talk about compressed work days, where you work a full week into a smaller amount of time. We also talk about job sharing and temporary part-time work, and even career flexibility, where at certain points of your life, maybe you have a new baby, or maybe you're looking to retire and you want to kind of step off the leadership track for a moment, or you want to come back without being stigmatized for somehow not being committed to your employer. So we're looking at all kinds of flexibility, and it is a continuum. It is difficult to do, but we have 100 companies that do it, and they're very successful when they do.
And is this sort of all these different words of different working and this flexibility, this is the sort of phenomena you were talking about, Hamish, in that it increases by, 120,000 people a year?
Something like that in the UK, and that's out of a workforce of whatever it's 30 million. So, it's clicking up steadily. 12% of the workforce, probably about 15 here in London where we are now, is now working from home.
I mean, obviously there are the jobs that you can't physically do away from a hospital ward or a school, but for jobs and possibly around this table, academia, media, you can have that flexible working condition. But then, Sally, you're saying if you're not physically there, you're not going to get the best assignments.
I think you need some face time. I think that's very important. What I think has gone wrong, again, to harp on my particular corner, which is the working mother, is that we need to have working fathers as well. And when fathers are interested in having some of these flexible arrangements, then I think women won't be seen by the office as being as unreliable if they're working from home. And then I think then people will get used to everyone doing some time at home, some time in the office, and then the promotion issue won't be such a problem.
As opposed to it always coming back to, it's working mothers that want the flexible time. If you can change that perspective, Dr. Almut McDowell, something that you would consult employers about?
Absolutely. And I think the mistake that many employers make, for instance, here in the UK, we've got the right to request flexible working, and parents with young children are one of the groups that can avail themselves of it. Note it's only a right to request. Businesses don't have to grant granted if they've got a good business reason to say no. But often what happens in practice is it's being dealt with the employee and their line manager. So it's a deal that is being done behind closed doors, and often what they don't do is talk to the team, talk to the other people being involved. And then often you get an awful lot of resentment. Why is it okay for them to go home at 3? Why can they work from home and I can't? What we don't do near enough of actually is getting these things out on the table and talking about them in an organisation, in a team. I think that's something that is absolutely crucial to making this work.
Hamish.
There's one other way, of course, of managing this, which is not how a company should manage its flexible workforce better. It's actually the growth of one other phenomenon is the growth of self-employment. Mm-hmm. So you have a company which, instead of managing someone who's at home, actually is buying a service from someone who is self-employed at home. And that's another big phenomenon in the UK, and from memory the US as well, which has been the growth of self-employment. Now, this may be people who get fired and can't find jobs for themselves, so they do something at home. But I think is actually also a choice of some people who feel they'd like to escape from working for a big company. Maybe they're older, don't need the security that they would have. And so the natural thing to do is to start up their own business, and you naturally start that up from home because it's save you the cost of an office.
I'd like to know the figures on how many people have registered self-employed in the UK since 2008, whether that is a greater increase than, say, between the period 2004 and 2008 as a knee-jerk reaction to the economic climate, or is it another tax reason? People set up themselves self-employed so they are capped at a certain tax rate. The financial questions there, Hamish.
The answer is we don't know. It'd be lovely to know. We ask people, you're self-employed, is that voluntary or not? And some say it's voluntary, some say it isn't. The numbers have been going up very fast in the UK since 07, and and it's something like an extra 500,000 people since then. I don't carry in my head what happened for the previous 5-year period, but it was creeping up then. I think so. I think it is probably partly a function of jobs being hard to get. But I don't think it's only that. I think it's also partly a function of choice. And it's also partly a function of the ageing of the workforce. Because remember, one of the big increases in our workforce is people not retiring when they're supposed to, and going on, as indeed is this particular person talking to you now.
And Sally, you mentioned the evolution not keeping up. Where do working mothers stand in this? I mean, I
was just laughing actually because my husband owns his own business, and he works half of the time from his office in Sussex and half the time from our home in London. And it's very frustrating for him because it's easy for me to say, oh, can you just watch our daughter for half an hour? I just need to, go round to the shops or something. And it's really, so I speak about this actually from his perspective almost more than mine because I spend more time in the office. And my advice is that you need to, I hope he's not listening to this, put your foot down and say, no, I can't. I'm busy. I'm working, and you need to have the separation. And being my father's also self-employed. Being self-employed is very challenging. You need to have the discipline. You need to be the kind of personality who can make yourself work. And you need to set real parameters. I mean, one thing that we haven't spoken about so much, but one of the real challenges here is how you can afford to do this. I mean, my argument, which is that you need full-time childcare if you're going to be a working mother who's working hard from home. It's very Virginia Woolf, room of one's own. Great for middle-class women, not great if you don't have the money. Also not great for single parents. What do you do then? And I'm aware of that, and I think this is something that businesses and that parents need to think about carefully when they're figuring.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. We're talking about the recent announcement by Yahoo, a company which encourages people to surf the internet, clamping down on colleagues working from home. Has the phrase work-life balance become redundant? Taking part in the discussion is Jennifer Owens, editorial director for Working Mother Media and based in the US. Sally Peck, editor and lead writer of Mother Tongue, The Telegraph's digital parenting hub. Hamish McRae, financial journalist and associate editor of The Independent. And Dr. Helmut McDowell, occupational psychologist and head of Work-Life Consulting Limited. Companies need to keep up with actually what's going on in terms of the environment around them, the way people are choosing to live their lives. And I suppose that's a little bit of where you come in again, doesn't it, Dr. McDowell?
Well, also trying to understand what suits people so you can actually get the best out of them. If you look at the research that Ellen Kosek has done over at Purdue University in the States, it's showing quite clearly actually some of us really thrive on a lot of flexibility, and we want to dip in and out of things, and probably I guess I fall into that bracket. You will get much more out of me if you give me a lot of freedom and I can do things my way. There are people who aren't like that, and actually who quite like that, to be able to shut the office door at the end of the day and then just do something completely different and switch off. And I think we need to do an awful lot more work around understanding actually what are people's needs, actually how do they like to work, because once you understand that, you're actually going to get an awful more out of people. And I think that's perhaps one of the drawbacks, this increasing trend, which I've also seen in organizations where you've got lots of work outsourced and consultants coming. It's often actually really hard then to get a grip on actually who is managing this project, who is overall responsible, whose head is on the chopping block if it doesn't work. And that can be one of the potential drawbacks of having people going off and doing their own thing. But I do believe actually if you've got the right infrastructures in place, and actually you're using technology wisely, there is no reason why we can't do that. But I think often what organizations are saying, oh yeah, it's a great idea, let's go with it, let them all have working from home. Oh no, it doesn't work. Okay, let's call them back to the office. So there's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction there.
And that's what you were saying, Hamish, in terms of the ducking out a sort of big management decision here of not knowing which way to go, and actually financially, let's just say everyone comes in and then we can measure it easier.
Well, my observation, mind you, is a lot of people in the office spend their time, having cups of coffee and looking over people's screens and saying, what on earth are you doing there? Which actually is probably quite useful, but I'm not sure we're really particularly productive the whole time we're in the office. I think you've got to have a structure, and you've got to have a morning meeting, and everyone's got to be there, and they've got to be on screen there and then, on Skype or whatever, and then it's serious. And then people have to learn their own disciplines at home. What do you take off for lunch? When do you clock off? And of course, when most of us in the jobs where you never really, really clock off at all.
The debate moves on from what was just discussed once upon a time as work-life balance as to now what's teleworking, flexi-working. Just to come back to you, though, Jennifer, in the US there, you wrote a letter to the CEO of Yahoo, didn't you?
Yes, I actually wrote a letter to the boss who won't give you flex, because I get letters from people every once in a while who say that all the things you say are all well and good, but my boss still won't let anybody have any flexibility.
Sometimes companies in the US probably have different phrases for the work-life balance or how responsive they are to employees' needs. Do you think then that Yahoo have taken a really regressive step back?
Oh, most definitely. I really do. I think that the one topic we haven't talked about much is about the global economy, where we are taking calls at 7 a.m. or doing calls at midnight, because that's where we're doing business now. So, yes, it seems like in this discussion we're talking about our employers giving us flexibility, but I think increasingly, I know in my world, my job could never be 9 to 5 anymore. I need to be able to do those calls at different times, and I don't resent it, because I also know that come Friday when I work from home, I pick my kids up at school at 3. That's that's a gift to me, and you get me even more so during the week for it.
Sally, you come from a sort of working mother perspective then, as someone who is very soon to have your second child, you're 9 months pregnant. Do you think that then there's a responsibility that we have to shape our future, and it shouldn't all just be put on the employer's shoulders?
Completely. I think a lot of what we're talking about here is a social issue. It's not just the responsibility of Marissa Mayer as CEO of Yahoo. And I think the social issue is if women are expected to do all of the housework and childcare and then also try to carve out a career, it's not going to work. And the 9 to 5 culture is also a complete relic of the past. I mean, it's like 11 p.m. pub closing times. It's just not relevant at the moment. And I think it's great, because as Jennifer said, she wants to pick her children up from school. fine, and you want to be there for your children. You don't want to be in the office all the time, but something has to give. And I think, the two things that I think would help working parents the most is if both parents are involved in arranging the childcare. And also, as a lot of European countries have, if we had better nurseries in this country, and certainly in the United States where I'm from originally, if there were better, cheaper childcare, then I think mothers wouldn't have so much pressure put on them from such early days.
Hamish, then, do you think that until men take up a more flexible approach to working, companies will take them more seriously?
I think it varies enormously, actually. I mean, you've got families, from my own observation, where the wife, the mother, is the main working entity, and the dad looks after the kids. I can think of some friends of mine who do it that way. It makes a lot of sense. She's a city lawyer, and he's a writer, very good writer actually. But he's writing books, and he can fit that in around. So I mean, I think socially we will evolve, and we won't do it well. We just have to try and do it well enough. But I think managing people who you can't see is not just a phenomenon of managing home workers. This goes back to the great globalization point. It's also managing people in Bangalore or wherever. And I think that the difficult thing for companies to do will be to focus on the core that has to be done by a group of people. So Albert's point, who's in charge. But also you actually have to create a structure so people 1,000 miles away still feel part of the team. And I guess that's going to be another long learning process for managers.
You're nodding in agreement there, Almut.
Yeah, I think what we mustn't do is confuse control and management, because I'm quite convinced that behind this decision in Yahoo also was the notion of actually I want to exert control over my workers. I think what we need to be looking at really is managing our people, well, taking an evidence-based approach to this. Who knows where actually in what context home working does work, where it doesn't, where is the data, and taking a participative approach where you actually involve your employees as well, because what doesn't work so well is just telling people and giving a decision and saying, actually, there you have it, okay, now you have to make it work for yourself.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia from the heart of London. On weekdays we broadcast live from 4 p.m. until 8 p.m. We're bringing news, current affairs, features and debate. Now you can listen to us on digital radio and online. Visit ruvr.co.uk.
I'd like to thank all my guests for taking part in the discussion on homeworking. Jennifer Owens, Editorial Director for Working Mother Media in the US, Dr. Almut McDowell, occupational psychologist and academic at the University of Surrey, Sally Peck, editor and lead writer of Mother Tongue, the Telegraph's digital parenting hub, and Hamish McRae, financial journalist and associate editor of The Independent.
That was today's studio discussion, presented here on The Voice of Russia in London by Juliet Spare. Stay tuned for our main news bulletin, followed by our regular current affairs programme, presented today by Daniel Sinner.
A fair amount of anger about it, I would say. I think people think that it's a very backwards-looking thought, and there is a bit of fear. I think there's a lot of fear on Yahoo's part that they're unable to manage a workforce that's going 24/7, and they're not sure what everyone's doing every moment of the day. But then you also have fear from generally the workforce, fueled a lot by working moms, but by many people talking about how the flexible workforce, they don't like to see something that looks like it's going backwards.
Sally, you're the editor of Mother Tongue and you communicate with mothers on a forum online. What's the reaction been to this?
I think a lot of mothers in Britain have also been upset about this. They want to be able to work from home. But my position is that working from home when you're also looking after children is almost impossible. And you need full-time care for the child if you're going to work at home.
So do you think that this is a statement saying, I know I've done it, from Marissa Mayer, who's had her baby, and that she thinks, okay...
No, not at all.
Okay.
I mean, she's in the very early stages of motherhood. She is a lot wealthier than any of us, I'm willing to bet.
Independent. Dr. Almut McDowell, occupational psychologist and head of Work-Life Consulting Limited. Sally Peck, editor of Mother Tongue, The Telegraph's digital parenting hub, and Jennifer Owens, editorial director for Working Mother Media based in the US. First of all, I'm going to come to you, Jennifer. What's the reaction in the US to what could be perceived as an ironic statement from the CEO of a tech company stopping people being plugged in 24/7 at home and demanding they come into the office?
There's actually...
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. Just when you thought flexible working conditions were becoming more widespread amongst companies, the CEO of one of the world's leading internet companies has banned employees from working from home. Yahoo's Marissa Mayer wants workers in the office. A memo sent from the HR department said, "Speed and quality are often sacrificed when we work from home. We need to be one Yahoo, and that starts by being physically together." A recent survey has revealed that 60% of British companies offered some kind of remote working in 2011. 5 years before that, that figure was just 13%. To discuss the home working revolution and the decision by Yahoo to stop employees from doing so is Hamish McRae, financial journalist and associate editor of The Independent.